Everyone.
Okay. Do you know how to do that? Because I don't.
What did you want to do?
Folks to the stage, our speakers to the stage, so that way it focuses them. Because right now, because we've got some people trickling in, I see people are moving around. So I've got.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I am able to do it. Gianna. Do I get that
Oh,
right?
I got it, Shamsi. I got them, I think.
Thank you, guys. Sorry. I'm a non-technical person here.
No worries.
So after you say your thing, I will remove you from stage. Robin.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay. So this was posted, by the way, on my Cyber Center event page. So
Great. Do you think I should wait a couple more minutes, or it's 1 now, so I could just start?
yeah, let's
just start.
wait a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Wait a couple minutes. Okay.
Yeah. It's just one. So
Yeah.
I see a couple of students. But anyway, in the meantime, I'd like to thank all of you for your time and providing this opportunity. I see in students' face when they hear from people who are in the field and how they get there. It is very interesting for them. And everyone has a different path, so that makes it even more interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for our panelists as well, for folks that may or may not have been kind of privy to the higher level, a lot of I know Mass Bay in particular, but a lot of the community colleges this semester really saw an increase in enrollment thanks to the Mass Reconnect program, which makes community college free for folks that are over 25. So definitely, I think in the next, few cycles as well, particularly for those of us in cybersecurity, I think there are going to be more opportunities to be involved in forums like this, because there are going to be so many folks that are now able to financially take advantage of higher education.
Yeah, if they were thinking about it, but yeah, that's definitely true. And we heard in Mass Cyber Center meeting that almost all colleges are experiencing the same thing. Ours has been in I don't know, 25% or something overall in college increase. Wow. Some have been 50% in specific areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have had to add sections, more sections.
I know, you were telling me that. It's a good problem to have these days.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's a good problem to have as long as you have faculty to teach them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you guys want to help us as an adjunct, please. Please do.
Absolutely.
Do you want me to read the thing now?
Yes,
All right.
definitely.
All right, so I'm just going to read this disclaimer and then we'll get started. Please note that this session is being recorded. It may include your likeness or your voice. You have the option of muting your camera or your microphone, but participation implies authorization for Mass Bay to use such likeness and voice on this recording in perpetuity. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. And again, I want to welcome our panelists. And we are so grateful for your time and talking to our students about your career. And I don't want to take up time. I rather you guys talk than me. So please, thank you.
Thanks, Shamsi. And thank you to Mass Bay for having the WESIS Massachusetts chapter here. We're so honored to be able to have this conversation with you all, and hopefully it will be a conversation. So I'm going to introduce myself and our panelists, and then we've got some, kind of questions. We had a lovely meeting between us. Some of us know each other, and some of us this was new. And then we do plan on saving time for questions after. But if you've got, if you're like me and you think of a question as someone's talking and you want to drop it in the chat, I'll make sure to look at that as well as we're going through. So thank you. My name is Megan Martinez. Some of you may know me in my role because I am often talking to Mass Bay and specifically with Shamsi and Robin in my capacity as the Director of Cyber Range Programs with Cyber Trust Massachusetts. And so in that capacity, I am working with the college in providing those experiential learning opportunities. So for those of you that have access to the Cyber Range platform, and have participated in some of those exercises and more to come, certainly, then you've heard me talk before. So I'm mostly going to be moderating today and providing really lifting up our three wonderful panelists here. I also am delighted to be involved in this as the new Vice President for WESIS Massachusetts as well. We also have our WESIS Massachusetts President, Gianna Dean, here, who also does security and data governance with Evercore Partners. We have our WESIS Massachusetts Events Coordinator with Arunima Sharma here, who works as a security consultant with Synopsys. And then finally, to round us out, we have Ladrina Chern here, who just has such a wealth of knowledge, teaching, speaking internationally, having a background in digital forensics. I can't even remember actually. Oh, we met through the Mass Cyber Center through a mentorship. I was like, oh, I can't even remember. I just feel like we've been kindred spirits. So I'm not going to go in too much detail about their past. I'm going to leave that to them, but we're going to just kind of dive right into it because the title today of this talk is kind of finding your footing and recognizing that everyone kind of has different paths here into cybersecurity, as do the 3/4 of us today. So Gianna, you are our fearless president here for our WESIS Massachusetts chapter, but you and I think, share kind of this idea that we don't necessarily see ourselves as kind of this technical person, or originally saw ourselves as a technical person, the way cybersecurity can kind of often be portrayed. So how did you find yourself in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Gianna Dean. As Megan said, thank you for the introduction, and I'm very excited to be here. So how did I get where I am? Well, pretty funny when you think about WESIS. WESIS is a nonprofit organization, so us being a part of the affiliate, we're volunteering our time. And so what really made me want to be a part of an affiliate is that WESIS helped me get where I am today. So coming out of college, I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and I minored in computer information systems. So I did, my junior year, I decided I think that I want to learn a little bit of knowledge about computers because I started hearing cybersecurity and I was like, this is something that interests me. When I originally went to school for criminal justice, most people will say like, oh, you want to be a cop? And that wasn't really the route that I wanted to go down, but I knew that I wanted to do something in that space. So ended up finding in hearing about cybersecurity and took a dive into the computer classes to kind of get me to where I am. So my senior year of college, I attended the WESIS conference that they have every year on a student scholarship. So I just applied and got the scholarship. So they paid for me to go to the conference. And there, the biggest thing that I did was network. I, went to all the tables at the career fair and was kind of like, what is cybersecurity? Like, I don't really know. Like, I've heard this term, but I, don't really know much about it, but it seems something that's interesting to me. And I ended up meeting my former boss for my first job in cybersecurity. And that was all through just talking and showing that I was interested in learning. And she gave a chance on me. And so then I ended up working under her. So I started out in cybersecurity and vulnerability management. So when you think about vulnerability management, it's the piece of vulnerabilities, any weakness that can come into your organization. So this is kind of on the blue team side, which is that non-technical side. So I knew that, that was probably the area that I would either want to start in or thrive in, because I took a few computer classes. I really had the basic knowledge of computers out of college. And then now I transferred into a security governance role. So when you think of security governance, it's about permissions, like who can access what data within the organization. So again, still on that side of working on the blue team side, working on that, thinking of governance policies. How do we keep our organization secure through our own employees, what our own employees are doing, rather than what the outside people trying to come in are doing. So yeah, that's really how I got here. And one thing that I did outside of college was a certification. So I got my Security Plus certification through CompTIA, and that was a basic certification that a lot of entry level jobs look for in the cybersecurity field. So ended up getting that through the job that I worked at. They paid for me to go to a boot camp and then get the certification. So, the biggest things and ways that I got here was through networking, and then having that, going into that certification piece. But that's something I'll also continue to touch on later in the discussion. But when you think about networking and really kind of putting yourself out there and just talking to people and, asking a lot of questions, that's one of my biggest pieces of advice, to know that you don't need to have a cybersecurity degree like directly in order to get here. So yeah, thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. We're dropping a lot of terms, I think, between all of us. You may have some familiarity or others. I'll try to kind of keep, referencing and defining, but, we can address that as we go on as well. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit to Arunima, who has had a little bit more direct path in some ways than some of us. Aruna, what did you go to school for, and how did you kind of land? I know we've talked a little bit about your being on the pen testing side of things. How did you kind of land that role?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Maspe, for having us here. To answer your question, Megan, now that I've heard about Gianna's journey, mine has been quite the opposite, actually. So I've always been interested in computer science, and that's the degree that I got in my bachelor's. And yeah, that's when I decided I like software, I like coding, and I like programming languages, and I started just with that. I actually went into software development first, and I have about 4.5 years of experience with software development. And as part of that, I used to work with Synopsys actually as software development as well. And I just learned about the cybersecurity tools that they were developing. And even as part of the software development, I saw a lot of security gaps that, developers kind of just leave, hoping nothing happens to their products. But I did see that, and I was very intrigued with how probably someone could exploit that, right? And that was one of the most intriguing parts of my job. I felt I was more intrigued about the gaps, security gaps, and like how to exploit them. I did enjoy software development, but I think I was more inclined towards learning the security aspect of things as well. And that's when I decided to take a master's in cybersecurity. So I went to Northeastern. I completed my master's last May, and I kind of pivoted my career towards cybersecurity. And just after a month after graduation, I joined Synopsys back again, but this time in the penetration testing roles. Um, Obviously, I had a lot of connections with Synopsys, but since this seems like a natural transition from software development to cybersecurity, but it is also pretty different because it's a completely different mindset. You're building things in software development and you're actually breaking things in the penetration testing side of things. So I did have to interview quite a lot of interview rounds, but then I think I'm finally where I feel I belong. I actually like doing penetration testing. I like red teaming. I'm trying to get into red teaming. So red teaming is basically the opposite of what Gianna said. It's basically attacking the organization, but in an ethical manner. So you're there with their permission and you're doing it with their permission and you're just letting them know, okay, this is something that is vulnerable, that is something that can be exploited. So yeah, that's the field I am currently working at, and yeah, it's been great.
Here, one of my, oh, you brought up so many things, and I think one of the things I'll just highlight before, because I could, like I could pick apart so many things and like so many topics to go off of. But when we talk about, I know everyone likes to think about, well, how does my degree or how does my training going to translate into a job, right? There are cybersecurity centric jobs, and then there are kind of what I call cyber adjacent roles as well. And so software security is one of those ones where you can be I guess I would say maybe traditional software security person and building and writing code. But then you can also layer on that cybersecurity piece to it as well. So I think even if one wants to stay in a traditional software security role, having that extra cyber lens can really make you that much better at your role if you choose to kind of stay in that lane. So far we've heard from Gianna talking about, kind of vulnerability management, risk management. We've got Arunima from the pen testing software security side. And now I want to switch to Ladrina because Ladrina's had a wonderful diversity of experiences and has gone between, kind of working in what we call the private sector or corporate, job, working for a large company. Also have done some wonderful and very important work in public policy that we don't always talk about. And also has the the ability to travel and is very well known nationally and internationally for her speaking and her teaching. So I'm wondering, Ladrina, if you can talk a little bit about kind of that, like how you made those kind of different transitions and why you chose that route as opposed to some other people that may have chosen to stay kind of in one role for much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Mass Bay, for having us all. So, Lodrina Cherney, I'll share a little bit of my journey, but let me share a little bit about who I am as a person. I'm a woman, I'm a person of color, I'm somebody who's a first-generation college student. In fact, we can go back further and say I'm a first-generation high school student. My parents are immigrants who didn't have the opportunity to reach that level of education. So when I talk about my path, I'm really talking about somebody who wandered a lot and tried to find my way through school. And I think like Arunima, I went to school for computer science, but that's where my path completely veers off. I'm somebody who was interested in computer security, but not at all in coding. And I found out that's what a lot of my degree at school was based around. It was a lot of math, it was a lot of coding. And while I am so proud to have my computer science degree, I knew even on my graduation day that coding and what I had learned in school was not for me. So I really took advantage of continuing education and learning and eventually found my way, thanks to Bunker Hill Community College here in Boston, where I'm based, into the field of digital forensics. So if you are somebody who likes finding little details, who maybe likes reading mystery or thriller novels and pulling on those loose threads and kind of looking under every rock, that's the kind of work that digital forensics involves, whether it is looking at data related to crimes, and I worked on a lot of white collar crime and embezzlement, or if you are working on reverse engineering malware and figuring out how somebody broke into a system, these are all parts of digital forensics. So if this sounds interesting to you and you're like, I've never heard of forensics or reverse engineering, I wanted to throw out a website called Cyberseek. And cyberseek.org is a really great website that can help you break down the cybersecurity field. So if you're interested in, we talked about blue teaming, red teaming, and where that falls in the spectrum of cybersecurity work, that's a really great one to check out. So Cyberseek. I'll pivot quickly into policy and just share that I've done digital forensics work and what I call computer crime solving for many years and now teach it. And I really wanted to expand my horizons. So if we think about cyber policy work, let me give one example. When you think about maybe laws that our lawmakers are thinking about today, and maybe our lawmakers are saying, you know what? Everybody who accesses this website has to be over 18 years old. Or thinking about laws related to filtering content. And you know what? Just for everybody's safety out on the internet, we need to filter every image that goes across the internet. You know, if there are laws like the ones that I've just kind of summarized, which are somewhat real and somewhat made up, but our lawmakers, in efforts to help regulate the internet, in efforts to help us attain privacy, are working on laws that maybe are good ideas, maybe aren't even technically possible. So if some of the scenarios I just brought up, like, you know what, to access this certain website, you need to be 18 years old, and you start thinking, I don't want to give my ID or my license out to a website, or do I have to give it to the government? Or what's going on here? This doesn't sit right with me. If you hear about things in policy, in law, in regulations, where you're like, I have the technical expertise to know that's not actually really possible, or that involves a lot of steps, cyber policy is something that you all might want to look into as well. So I'll pause there, but that's just a little interest and intro into forensics and cyber policy. So back to you, Megan.
Ludrina, you know, I find that I'm talking a little bit more about the opportunities in cybersecurity policy these days. One, because we don't seem to, you know, we tend as an industry to talk more about the operations roles, even, you know, in pen testing, even I think, Gianna, you might agree with me that even risk management, we don't necessarily talk a lot about in terms of like, what does that job look like and what the opportunities there. But I think increasingly with the conversations about, you know, artificial intelligence and automation and like kind of what it means to be human and what we're trying to replicate, the idea of, you know, public policy and who's going to make those decisions and what kind of ramifications do they have are becoming increasingly more important. So let's take it back, you know, since I mentioned AI, and of course everyone's talking about it these days. Arunima, what in your role from a pen testing, you know, aspect, I know you mentioned you were in software security about 4.5 years, you know, pen testing is slightly newer, but what kind of changes and advances have you seen just in that short amount of time that, you know, you either wish you had kind of known or, you know, would advise our mass-based students, for example, to kind of consider when they're thinking about cybersecurity?
Yeah, for sure. So coming from the software development background, I did have a knowledge of how products are built and how does the pipeline look. And there are many operational decisions where you can't control that this version has to go out in like a week And then you don't really have time to do a lot of security testing around that in that whole 1 week. So there's like a lot of operational things as well that come into cybersecurity. And that's one thing that I've learned. It's not completely technical. So as obviously Laudrina and Gianna, both of them are immersed in both like the technical fields and the non-technical fields. So thinking of cybersecurity as a more comprehensive term, which encompasses technical, non-technical, and operational burdens as well, right? So I think it's important to think of it in a more holistic manner. Uh, for you to have that idea of just maybe entering one field and excelling in it, that's great. But you also have to learn about the non-technical aspects or the other policy aspects or the governmental regulations that come along with it, right? So that's one thing that I was not very aware of, because coming from the technical side of things, I thought, yeah, this is the way to go forward, right? But yeah, you get introduced to a lot of things um, in like more comprehensive manner when you enter the industry, right? And from the technical point of view, I think you mentioned artificial intelligence, you mentioned tools. So there's a lot of automation tools, there's a lot of things that we use in pen testing. But even right now, I feel that there's a lot of manual effort that goes into pen testing. There's a lot of you need to look at the tools. You can't just rely on the tools. So I think that's a very far-fetched idea of it's very futuristic, I would say, where we could completely rely on the tools. I don't think that's really possible right now. There's so many false positives. False positives are when the tool thinks it's something that you can exploit, but you really cannot, because, yeah, it's just not catered to that human functioning brain, right? And the context of the entire environment is not taken into consideration by the tools. So while they do help, and they aid and they've obviously fastened the entire process, I still think that there's a lot of manual work under pen testing, red teaming. And being a software developer in the past, I kind of try to automate those things. I write down scripts. So I find myself like right in the middle of software development and computer security and pen testing, where I'm trying to find a gap and like I'm trying to overcome that manual process with automation. But yeah, definitely there's like a lot of things that are happening as we speak, and it's like very important to just keep yourself updated. Just go into the field head first, learn about things, because it's going to be all interconnected in the end. It's not going to be just one field that you're focusing on. You just learn about cybersecurity with whatever resources you have. I think that's one thing that I think, yeah, I agree about.
That's a really good point. I think the intersectionality, right, of cybersecurity with so many other different areas. You know, part of my journey, right, is I was one of those people again that never saw myself as a technical person, but I loved learning about other cultures and other countries, and so I kind of got into the cyber intelligence side of things in terms of, hey, what is this country? You know, we hear about, you know, Russia, for example, and you know, why are they interested in cybersecurity? Why are they focused on that? You know, those types of things. So I was really into the reading and information sharing kind of piece of it. So I think and then, you know, I do a lot of presentations now. And so having to work on my public speaking skills, how do I distill that information? You know, there's a lot of additional skills, as you point out, in addition to the technical. And I think one of the things that you highlight as well when we talk about AI or anything kind of in our fields, right, is we talk about critical thinking. We have to make our own decision, right, as well, and not solely rely on a tool or a particular person or report, right? That's part of discerning kind of what is true and what is maybe embellished. Because you're right. I think there's often these extremes of talking about AI is going to save us and AI is going to kill us. And the truth is probably somewhere more in the middle. And how can we talk about it responsibly and accurately as well? You know, one of the things I think that everyone's kind of mentioned and touched on a little bit is, you know, how you've kind of learned and the power of of the people that you've interacted with. Gianna, can you talk a little bit more? You know, you mentioned about, you know, networking at the conference, at WESIS conference, and, you know, that's played a huge role in my trajectory as well. But for our learners here and folks that are listening afterwards, I think that's very daunting, right? Of like, throw yourself in these situations. Can you talk a little bit about how you approached it and kind of what you learned, and maybe some tips for folks as they try and learn what networking can do for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely can see how it can be daunting. And, you know, as a college student, that was probably one of my least favorite things is I'd always attend career fairs and stuff. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go talk to these people. I have my resume, I'm ready to go. And then all of a sudden I would get really nervous and I'd be like, but I don't have these skills. How am I going to, you know, apply for a job? Like stuff like that. And then I really started to think about it as the perspective of, okay, let me just be myself and really advocate for what what I bring to the table as a person rather than what I'm bringing to the table as what's on my resume. Um, for example, it wasn't particularly a cybersecurity job. I was going to a career fair, you know, as a criminal justice student. And one thing I would notice, and I feel like you'll even see this at bigger conferences that you go to when you go to the career fairs, a lot of people are going towards these huge companies, you know, whether in our space, it's like Google, Amazon, etc. Back then, when I was doing criminal justice stuff, it was going to the FBI, going to all these agencies where it's like you have thousands and thousands of people applying. And not that that's a bad thing. It shouldn't make you not want to strive to do that. What about these other tables where there's, you know, even where I'm in right now, I've always been in financial services. I'm just going into 5 years in cybersecurity. So at the time, I didn't know that financial services even had cybersecurity. I'm starting to learn now that every company, for the most part, has cybersecurity and or is developing it. But what I'm getting to with that is I actually went to a table where there was not one other student at the table, had a conversation with that person where one, it wasn't daunting for me because I'm not waiting behind a line of other students, hearing what they're saying, what they bring to the table. And I ended up getting a job with this company where they didn't have positions at the like as for college students. It was only for full-time positions for people out of school, but they saw something in me and then was able to give me a job. So it's just the concept of trying to figure out what can you offer, what can you like bring your actual personality and bring that drive to learn and say. And also a lot what I've learned about in like job seeking and stuff is how you can transfer your skills that you have. I think that's a big thing, you know, transferable skills. You working at a grocery store and interacting with people can pivot into a cybersecurity role, because a lot of things that I also like to think about is, you know, how Megan was saying too, we now have like roles where we might learn some technical stuff along the way. That stuff can be taught. The soft skills and other aspects that you can bring to the table can't be. And so really think about those things too. And yeah, another thing I did was networking through LinkedIn. So following specific accounts, two that really helped me is a guy named Mike Miller. He advocates for helping people get into the fields, and even wrote a book about it. And then David Meese, Meece, he provides a bunch of different resources. And really, I worked with Mike individually, met with him a few times via Zoom when I was looking to transition out of my vulnerability management job into my current role. Because even being in the field, I was like, okay, but I don't feel like I have enough skills, being earlier on in my career and working with people and having other people help you see that you have other skills, whether maybe you don't have everything that the job description lists, or maybe you don't, you know, we don't know everything because there's so many different things going on in cybersecurity, but again, going back to that transferring what you do know, and then also having that willingness to learn and saying different ways that you're trying to learn can become really valuable in searching for a job and or just as you continue to grow.
Thanks, Gianna. And maybe I put, since you spelled David's name, I put him in the chat, but maybe you could pop the other gentleman in as well.
Yep.
If folks, want to check those folks out. Something you mentioned, Gianna, you mentioned Security Plus and certifications. Ladrina, you actually, I know you hold a bunch of certifications. You actually teach for one of the, probably the preeminent industry certification leader for cybersecurity. What is your kind of take when we talk about networking, and there's a certain, learned skill of being able to talk about ourselves, right? But what do you think the role is between certifications and degrees, and then also that uniqueness of how we position and present ourselves as well? What role do all those three play?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, big snaps to Gianna talking about working at a supermarket and developing your customer service skills. Like, this is something that I talk about all the time. So I just want to back up that point. Whatever professional experience you have, whether it is, a job or volunteer work, I'm almost positive that there is going to be a way for you to roll that expertise into your cyber career. So as far as getting certifications, thinking about different educational pathways, if you take one other thing away, I would say it's that right now, the programs that you are in and the classes you're taking are going to give you such a great foundation. Be aware that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, out in the real world, you might be working in a completely different aspect of cyber that we're not even talking about yet. So it could be the next AI, it could be the next machine learning, it could be the next who knows what. And that's certainly something that I found myself in. If you had told me I would be doing mobile forensic malware reverse engineering when I was in college, I would go, what the heck is that? I don't even know what that is. So I just want to say, as you continue your educational journey, because by the way, that is one thing you have to do in cybersecurity is you are not going to get your degree when you leave school and then stop learning. So you will need to keep learning in some fashion as you keep going through your career. And I will say for certifications, I teach one for SANS Institute that is the GCFE. It's a GX Certified Forensic Examiner. Certifications are something that can help you prove that continued education and learning that you take on outside of the classroom. I do want to throw in one resource right now that some of you might be interested in is if there's a topic that you're interested in, and maybe it's not offered in school and you're wondering like, I just have this personal project of I'm interested in a topic and I want to learn more, and maybe you can't take my class or similar SANS classes. One really important phrase to look for is capture the flags, and I'll put this in the chat here. If you look up something like capture the flag or CTF and whatever the subject is you're interested in, so somebody was asking about looking at other resources for intelligence, for example. If you Google up CTF and capture the flag, I'll share that as one, I feel like usually easier to access resource that's often free online that can help you with your continuing education in classes that, or rather, in topics that maybe there aren't college classes for. So always be learning, and capture the flags are one way in addition to certifications to do that.
Absolutely. And, there's so much to unpack there in terms of, cost and value and focus. And, I know it's something that our WESIS leadership team is talking about and planning an event for to kind of dive a little bit deeper into these areas. But, I think my experience with certifications, I'll just say, and learning, right, is there's so many different ways, first of all, that people learn, right? And also so many different resources out there. And so, you know, take advantage of what's available to you. You should not, have to, I don't believe, you have to pay attention to costs, quite frankly. That's one of the reasons why I kind of pivoted into cybersecurity myself, was I was getting divorced and I needed to support myself and I needed to pay my bills as a single person. And so I absolutely recognize that, certifications are time and money, as is school, certainly, as well. So there's lots of different resources out there, webcasts, podcasts. I just realized that I'm trying to share sometimes, and I haven't been quite quick about sharing my screen, but there's a new to cyber summit happening through the SANS Institute, which is where Ladrina teaches through, which is in April. So that would be a great mechanism. Those summits, all of their summits typically have free content. Some of them then have, classes that you would sign up for and have to pay for. Another one that I really like is anti-siphon training, which is the sister organization to Black Hills Information Security, and I'll pop that in the chat. They do a lot of different pay-as-you-go trainings, pay-as-you-can, and free blogs and things like that. So figure out, I think, what you want to learn more about, and then try and hone in on some of that, and then you can kind of decide what those options are. One thing I wonder really quickly before we leave some time for other questions is, cybersecurity, and this is coming from my background as a mental health provider before I was a cybersecurity person, is, we are talking more about mental health and cybersecurity. And, some of the things that we're talking about, right, conversations about certifications versus school versus where do I focus my time on versus how do I manage continuous learning with having a life. I wonder if each one of you could just spend, a minute or two talking about, if that topic has come up for you, personally in your career, and kind of maybe a tip or anecdote about how you kind of manage balancing the nature of the cybersecurity industry and job with your mental health. Arunima, you want to go first?
Sure. So when talking about mental health, I think there's a wide spectrum of mental health that we're talking just within cybersecurity as well. So if you look at the specific areas of maybe dark web, or where you're actually going deeper into illicit activities, digital forensics even, you need to have that composure. You need to understand that this is a part of job and you need to dive with that understanding in those fields. I think it's important to have basically a difference between the reality that you're facing and just also understanding that there are good people, but there are also bad. So you need to have that understanding within yourself. Obviously, there's a lot of things that you need to do for yourself. Take breaks. There's always things or hobbies that you should indulge in, and that should be apart from reading or just staying current in cybersecurity. Just go out, take walks, work out, do something for yourself, which makes you feel good. Have your hobbies is like one of the things that you should definitely have just for your mental peace. And just speaking about my personal encounters with mental health, it was not something very serious, but then one of my managers, we were doing a source code review, and source code reviews are exhausting. They're very extensive. So there are lines and lines, like millions of lines of code, and you're going through each line of code and trying to understand where you could break that. And that's when my manager kind of chimed in and he was like, I think you should be taking more breaks. I don't think this is healthy to just keep reading code and just keep going through multiple videos on just one topic. Just take more breaks. And I think it's important to say, just set realistic expectations, even with your peers or with your managers. It's important to just tell them that this is realistically possible or impossible to do in this time frame. It's important to take that time out for yourself and just do the work when it's required, obviously, but also take time out for yourself. And that's very important in this field, I feel.
Wonderful. I know we've got a question in the chat as well, that I just want to, since they're utilizing the chat, I'm just going to kind of interrupt us for just a second, and incorporate, if anyone also has to add any advice for people who have started a cybersecurity position but don't have a formal training built out. How do you navigate that space? Because I think that also speaks to, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, I think, in this field. Gianna or Ladrina, any thoughts on this question or kind of the larger topic here of mental health and how we balance?
Yeah, I can go. I really struggled with the mental health piece of like getting into cybersecurity, and always like one term you might hear a lot is imposter syndrome, feeling like you don't have enough experience, expertise in the field. And what happened to me with that was I that was when I was looking into certifications, because again, don't have a computer science degree. So I got into my first role without that experience, but then, staying up to speed and being up in the topics, I was like, okay, I probably should get a certification. But then if you go to look online and you're like, okay, cybersecurity certifications, you're going to see hundreds of them. And then what happened with me was, okay, but which ones are important? Obviously can't do them all with, like Megan said, time and trying to figure everything out. So what I did was started with a basic certification of, one of someone who is newer into the field. And right now I just started studying for my CISSP, which you need to be certified in it, 5 years of experience. So I felt like that was a good timeline since I'm coming up on my 5th year, to start this one. But just going back with that, really picking what interests you, I think is one thing. And then also, um, taking time aside to look into these things, whether that be you talk with your manager when you're thinking of, what are your goals for the year. You could say, if you're interested in a certification, you could ask them, what certifications do you recommend that would be good for advancing in my role? I'm interested in this. Do you think that this would be a good certification? I think really talking with your managers, like Arun was saying, like one, having a good relationship with your managers and just like speaking up about like what you need, whether that be like, hey, do you think that I can spend X amount of hours a week looking into certifications or studying for certifications on the job as well? That could also help give you some extra time to do other things, but while also staying up to date, and helping you. So I think it can be overwhelming, and I was very overwhelmed with it, and I still do kind of get overwhelmed with, feeling that still feeling of, but there's so much out there. Am I doing enough? But you have to have that work-life balance, and I think that's where it comes into play. And just, doing it through your work and kind of figuring out with your work, what you can do to keep advancing, I think would be helpful as well.
Thanks, Gianna. And before I pass it on to Ladrina, Rashawn, I'm just wondering if you could pop our email in the chat in case folks have questions, for us that we haven't had time to address. The time has just flown by. Perhaps I think any one of us would be happy to follow up via email as well. Ladrina, I'm going to give it to you to kind of close us out.
Awesome, thank you. So let's see if I can cover learning on the job and mental health all at once. Earlier, I had mentioned in the future you might be working in a field of cybersecurity that doesn't even exist yet. But for your first role, somebody has probably done what you are trying to do. So even if you are a cybersecurity team of one at your very first job, my advice would be don't reinvent the wheel. And the way to do that, I'm just going to echo things that came up a whole bunch of other times during this conversation. By networking, by going to conferences, by exposing yourself to other talks, other things online. So networking, kind of one-on-one, talking to people about their jobs, talking to people who have the title you want. Looking at archives of cybersecurity talks on YouTube about topics that you are struggling with. So for now, for your early career jobs and as you navigate the transition from student to professional, you probably don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I found for me, networking has been really huge for me. And it doesn't even have to be within cybersecurity. You know, I've had family members who've worked at a company where somebody at that company knew somebody who was hiring, and just getting out there and talking to people about what you want to do and seeing if they can help you get there, not sticking your head in the sand, and seeing where things take you. I hope is helpful.
Thank you so much, Lorena. I mean, we've covered so much. All of our panelists have hit on so many important things. I always, as you all can tell, I have plenty to say, but I don't necessarily have anything to add here except thank you. If you have any other questions in the chat, I talk to Shamsi maybe more than she wants to, so I can certainly provide her and we can communicate through her. Please find us on LinkedIn. I saw someone asked us that. More than happy to do that. And our email address is in the chat that Roshana posted. So we're happy to communicate as well. Thank you again, everybody. We hope this was valuable. Please feel free to give us either through Shamsi or you can send it to me on LinkedIn, feedback. We want to make sure that these opportunities are valuable to you. And we've gotten quite a few requests from other schools as well. So, understanding what was valuable and helpful and what you'd like us to focus on in the future would be great. Shamsi, anything else before we let this?
That's it. I enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, Megan, for running it. And it was a pleasure meeting you if we had not met before. Anyway, it was nice to see you and meet with you. Thank you again. This was great.
Happy
Thank you.
Monday, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great week.